Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to part 5 of Why These Champs Suck and How to Fix Them. My name is Chris, and today we'll be going through 3 more champions, looking at, where they sort of failed, what potentially went wrong with them, and how we could fix them. Now, today's 3 champions, unlike yesterday, we don't have a Lucian thrown in there where it's kind of a bit of a shock that, oh really, Lucian doesn't have a 50% plus win rate deck. And a reminder, that is where I'm taking these champions from, is the list of champions that Riot says don't have a 50+% win rate deck as of whenever that Reddit post was, probably a week or so ago now. And yeah, we're gonna dive in straight away with our 3 champions. Some pretty fun ones, some ones that I quite like today as well. So let's dive straight in and see what we think. So the first champion we are tackling today is Riven, and Riven, when Riven was first sort of, shown to us in the spoiler, I think a lot of us thought, whoa, wow, a 3-mana 3/4 with like a good ability and, like a potentially very strong level up, with the Blade of the Exile, like, whoa, this could be a big threat, and this could be like really quite good. And I think a lot of us probably thought that. But it never really panned out that way. And so why on earth is that? Because they even, buffed Riven. I think the buff to Blade Squire was much needed and very welcomed. Some people called for Runeweaver to be a 3/2. It hasn't happened. Maybe it will one day. But Riven as well. Obviously, the Blade of the Exile came down to 1 mana. They buffed it. Riven did get better. It definitely felt better, but it still hasn't really, hit things hard. And I think the main reason why, and I'm sure a lot of you will probably agree, is that Riven essentially is a worse Draven. And that isn't great. And I know they play slightly differently, but for most decks and what most decks want to do, Riven is a worse Draven. Draven has quick attack from the start, and he generates, his blades somewhat quicker than Riven will get you on her own. And Draven essentially is like Riven without having to play the rest of a package. Draven will just do it all for him, do it all on his own. And as a 3-mana champion in the same region, I do just feel that Riven kind of gets outclassed by Draven, and Draven is just a generally better option overall, which is unfortunate. And that might not be true of every single deck, but I think most decks that is true. And I think the Riven is always going to suffer with that problem unless one key thing changes. And I've thought about this quite a bit, and I think I do know how to fix Riven and make Riven, one of the stronger champions in the game, perhaps. And it would bring Riven in line with Draven, because I think the big difference between the two and what really separates them apart is the fact that the Blade Fragments cost 1 mana. I genuinely believe that is what is keeping Riven back. It seems so small, but paying 1 mana for like a focus speed effect, even if these effects, are pretty powerful, you have to do them before combat, and the fact that they cost 1 mana, actually I think makes a big deal, because, anything, a champion like Riven, wants to probably be winning the game by turn 7 or 8, let's say. You've leveled up Riven, you've potentially given her the blade, you're smacking your opponent in the face for a pretty big hit on like turn 6 to 8, let's say. And the problem is, if you want to win the game by that point, like, you're gonna need mana to do everything that you want. But the fact that these Blade Fragments cost 1 mana each is, I think, quite painful and potentially holding Riven back. So what I would like to see, of course, is those Blade Fragments costing 0 mana. This would bring Riven, more in line with Draven, because, of course, his axes cost 0 mana. These are still focus speeds for, probably what is a better effect overall. And so I think that would really help a Riven. Now, I think that personally, if that just happened on its own, would possibly be too strong. I think Riven and the whole Reforged package might just become too good solely on their own. So what I would also like to see then is the Blade of the Exile go back up in mana, potentially to 3. And you can see it as kind of like a, you have to play the 3 blades here, so you're paying, currently you're paying 4 mana for it. But I think a strong buff would be to make these 0 mana, so that, and bring the blade back to 3, so that overall for the Blade of the Exile you're paying 3 mana for that whole effect. I think that that would be the best thing to do. I think that it probably would really help Riven a lot. It would just make the whole package quite a bit better. You also could change Weapon Hilt because Weapon Hilt isn't a great card. Um, it really isn't that good of a card, and obviously being Riven's signature spell, that somewhat holds her back as well. But I think if you make those Blade Fragments 0 mana and, you know, up the cost of the Blade of the Exile, that would be a big change for this archetype and really would push Riven, I think, in the right direction. And then I think you would probably have, if you didn't change Draven at all, which I argue you probably should. I think Draven somehow seems to avoid everyone's like radar for this card is really, really strong. Let's nerf it finally. But if you kept Draven the same but changed Riven, I think then at least you would have a balance of like Riven is better in some decks quite clearly than Draven would be. Whereas I feel like that might not be the case at the moment. I feel like any deck that you do play Riven in, you could probably always say to yourself, should I be playing Draven here? And the answer might always be yes. You know, even in something like Riven Taric, you know, where you're kind of going all in on single units, I would still argue Draven might be better, which is a bit sad, really. So yeah, that's kind of that. That's how I change Riven, and I think it would definitely be a big improvement to Riven, and she would probably, you know, be competing for like a tier 1 deck, you know, high tier 2 decks, and that's kind of what obviously I want to see for some of these champions that have never really seen that before, so that would be nice. This next one I am very excited for because I recently released a video about why Leona is the most lost champion in the game, because she just doesn't have any clear synergy with any other region. Really, you know, she's lost. She's on her own. She's just, you know, she's the only Daybreak champion. She has some stun synergy with some others. But really, it's taken a while for anyone to play Leona. And it's not that Leona is super bad. You know, I don't think any of the 3 champions that we're talking about today are like in the bottom 5 of champions. I just think that they need slight tweaks just to, you know, really bring them up. And so Leona is another one where I think, you know, you don't have to go crazy with Leona to make her good. But I think the problem is definitely with Leona and not her support package, because pretty much, I mean, every card on this screen, maybe not Eye of the Rahorak, but every one of these first 6 has a place within the game and is pretty good and sees play. So it's definitely not the Daybreak archetype that needs changing. I think it definitely goes to Leona. And again, this is another one where I'm pretty happy with the sort of idea that I came up with for Leona, because what I would do is change Leona. You know, her first form is fine. I think that it's her level up form isn't strong enough and doesn't do quite enough as much as it could do. So what I would do is, instead of, you know, every time you activate Daybreak stun the strongest enemy, I would change this back to like just the first time you activate Daybreak, you know, stun the strongest enemy. I think that that would be fine. But what I would add to Leona is every time you do activate Daybreak, grant me 1/1. And what this would do, crucially, is give Leona very clear synergy to go all in for this Daybreak idea, and then she also makes a lot of sense with Zenith Blade. Now, maybe you think that that's too strong. Maybe you could take away the stun from her leveled up form. Maybe she just gets 1/1 every single time you play a Daybreak card and activate Daybreak, which obviously then, you know, sort of warrants you going, okay, well, let's go all in then. Let's play an all-in Daybreak deck. We have like enough cards at this point. You know, you've got a lot of like decent options here. You'd obviously be playing Ravon as well. You know, you probably play Eclipse Dragon, to be honest. And you just have this very strong, you know, maybe a Leona Asol deck. I don't know. You know, yeah, Leona Asol with Eclipse Dragon in there makes sense. You know, and you just play for this sort of big, meaty mid-range deck where, you know, and then you give things Zenith Blade and you just roll with it. And Leona, you know, my idea here was obviously that would be Leona harnessing the power of the sun, kind of similar to how Diana does in her leveled up form. You know, the more you activate Nightfall, the more her attack goes up. I think because Leona is a 4-mana card, you know, you can warrant that. And again, if it's too strong or whatever, you know, you could always make the level up slightly higher. That would be perfectly fine as well. But I think it would be strong. I think that that would change Leona for the better. It would give her more of sort of a clear, like, thing to do, and would also probably be easier for then, later developments for you to make another champion that synergizes with her and that makes sense for her. Leona then could have some pretty neat synergies with a bunch of different things, whether it's, you know, a Shadow Isles for Atrocity. I know that that shouldn't be the first thing that comes to head. A Riven for a Blade of the Exile. You put it on Leona, you give her Overwhelm, you go crazy with Leona. All of those things would work, and I think that that would be a really nice change to Leona, and, I hope it's thematic. It feels like it should be, because if Diana does it, I'll just assume that Leona also, can harness the power of the sun. That's kind of, her thing, right? So I think that that is what I would do, and I think it would be a nice little change to really kind of help propel Leona to those upper echelons of the champion ladder. And lastly, we come to another champion that, again, is not the worst champion in the game, is perfectly okay, but maybe just needs a small one or two things to really make him tick, and that is Taric. Because Taric has always just been maybe a little slow. He's always been just a little slow, and I think the reason for that is oftentimes in a Taric deck, you're sort of forced to, like, pass turn 1 and turn 2, but then you kind of need a 3-drop in case you're attacking on 4 so that Taric can support it. It's kind of like you need a sort of perfect alignment. And weirdly enough, I think the Riven buff that I suggested would really help Taric in a weird way, because having those blade fragments cost 0 mana would just mean that, you have more options in terms of, you could play units early on and still have things to, spells to use on Taric later on to get the value out of him. So that's kind of, an indirect buff to Taric would be buffing Riven in that way, which I think would be nice to see. But if we look at Taric's sort of, other cards that came with him, the other support cards within Targon, obviously Mentor of the Stones is a perfectly fine card and helps Taric. Tiari the Traveler has never seen, I don't think I've ever seen this card be played, really. So, could this card become a 3-2? Probably, probably, yeah. Obviously you got Mountain Goat that would probably go with Taric as well, so maybe you don't need Tiari the Traveler to be buffed. Mountain Sojourners doesn't really work with Taric that well. Kind of goes better with like a Lulu support deck rather than a Taric support deck, so that's a little odd. So I don't really know what you could do for Mountain Sojourners for Taric specifically here, but if we do look at Taric himself then and think, okay, so we've got like an indirect buff if we buff Riven, which is nice. Maybe we could change one or two followers. His spell isn't great. It's below average, I would say. It does synergize with him, but it's not amazing. Could you change this to be like a 3-mana, give an ally 3/3 instead, which I think would fit better for Taric overall? Or even, slap draw a card on this somehow, which is really how, Taric shines with spells like Guiding Touch and Pale Cascade. Obviously casting them twice on things and getting the extra draw, that's where Taric really becomes powerful. You could do something like that, again, which would help Taric a lot, I think. And yeah, other than that, there isn't many ways you can change Taric, I don't think, because I don't want Taric to become like OP, because as soon as Taric becomes like the best champion in the game, I think you run into a bit of a problem. Like, Taric's leveled up form would be particularly annoying to play against if he was the best champion in the game. I'm sure we could probably all agree that if you were seeing Taric in every game, that would be pretty frustrating. So I'd want to be careful with Taric, because I don't want that to be the case. Could you make like a slight buff to make him a 4-mana 4/4? The 4-mana 4/4 isn't really a stat. Is there any champion with that stat line? They tend to use like 5/3 and 3/5 a lot more. But small things like that, make him a 4-mana 4/4. That just brings Taric's like floor, his value floor, that little bit higher. At least you're getting a 4-mana 4/4, which isn't great. You can get, better things than that for sure, but it is something at least. He'll be able to block out certain things that he couldn't before, as a better defensive tool as well, and maybe, more as a push damage tool, can end the game a bit quicker. So I think that little changes like that would how I'd, want to change Taric rather than going overboard. But yeah, stuff like buffing Riven, the way I've suggested, would be a big help to Taric because those free spells are kind of what he needs. That's why I think Taric works with Draven a bit better, because you don't have to save that mana for Taric to all of a sudden get value from it. You can just discard one axe onto the other, and then you've got, then it's all going and working fine. So small buffs to Taric, like changing this to a 4, maybe changing his spell to be, less mana cost, more sort of lesser effect for less mana cost. I think that those are the kind of things that Taric really needs. But there isn't much to be said about Taric because, as I say, I don't want him to become the best champion in the game. I kind of want him to be good, not great, if you understand what I mean. And so that is that, and that's our 3 champions for today. We'll be doing the same thing tomorrow with 3 more champions for all the ones that are 49% and below win rate that weren't on Riot's list. What I've done is essentially go down in mana cost. So we just hit Taric here. So the next ones will be from these ones that I haven't mentioned before. And I think there's a surprise tomorrow as well, one that you might not have expected. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Chris. Have a really nice day, and I will see you tomorrow with 3 more champions as we continue our design discussions. And the balance patch is just 1 week away, so let's hope for big changes there as well. So thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.